Somewhere in India, there is a temple that could not be built even today. In Egypt, buried underground, there are stone boxes weighing 100 tons each, and nobody can explain how they got there. In Greece, divers pulled up a device from the seafloor that calculated the movement of planets, 2,000 years before the first computer. None of this is myth, none of it is legend. Every object on this list is documented. Every one can be seen in person, studied, measured, photographed. And every single one asks the same question, the one that official history has never been able to answer. Who made these things? 7 objects, 7 countries, 7 things that have no business existing, and yet, here they are. We start with the heaviest one, literally, India, the state of Maharashtra, a site called Ellora. Here, in the side of a mountain, there is a temple, not built, not assembled from blocks, carved directly out of a single mountain, from the top down, 55 meters long, half the width of a football field, taller than a 5-story building. The exterior is covered in hundreds of life-size elephants, every surface layered with sculpture, thousands of figures, all cut from one continuous piece of rock. But the beauty is not the problem. The physics is. To carve this temple, builders had to remove 400,000 tons of stone from the mountain. Picture 40,000 fully loaded dump trucks. That is how much rock had to go somewhere. And this is where it gets strange. That stone was not just removed. It had to be transported, stacked, deposited somewhere. Except it is not there, not nearby, not a kilometer away, not 10 kilometers away. 400,000 tons of rock, simply gone. And that is still not the most unsettling part. The official explanation says the tools were iron chisels, but basalt scores a 6 on the Mohs hardness scale. Iron scores a 4. You cannot cut something harder than your own blade. It is the equivalent of trying to scratch concrete with a plastic fork. But suppose, for a moment, that iron somehow did the job. There is still one more problem. Construction ran top to bottom, the roof first, then the walls, then the floor. That means there was no margin for error. One wrong cut, and the stone is gone forever. A column shaved too thin will fall under its own weight. At Kailasa, there are no wrong cuts, not one. The symmetry holds across the entire structure. Every column is identical. A project of this kind today would require computer modeling and precision machinery. This was built in the 8th century. The Emperor Aurangzeb once tried to demolish it. He sent in thousands of soldiers. They worked for 3 years. The result was a few chipped elephants at the base. The temple did not move. Aurangzeb was a man who leveled entire cities, and yet by the end, he reportedly said, "It cannot be destroyed, and it cannot be recreated." Then he walked away. 400,000 tons of stone vanished. If that seems hard to accept, what comes next is harder. 1850. A French archaeologist named Auguste Mariette is walking through the Egyptian desert near Saqqara, following a line of stone sphinxes half buried in sand. They lead him to the entrance of an underground tunnel. He goes in and finds 25 enormous boxes made of black and rose granite. Each box is 4 meters long. The lid alone weighs 30 tons. Total weight per unit, 100 tons. That is roughly the weight of a loaded freight train car, sitting inside an underground niche with a clearance of about 40 centimeters on each side. The official explanation? This is where sacred bulls were buried. The problem? Not one box contained bones, organic material, or any trace of a burial. Every single one was empty. But that is not the part that keeps engineers up at night. Christopher Dunn spent 49 years in high-precision industrial manufacturing. He visited the Serapeum with professional measuring equipment and checked the interior surfaces of the boxes. What he found? A flatness that today is only achievable using computer-controlled machine tools. Perfect 90-degree corners, cut from a single piece of granite, quarried 800 kilometers away. He contacted an American manufacturing firm and asked if they could replicate one of the boxes. Their answer? We could do it using 6 separate slabs, but not from a single block. Not at that scale. Ancient craftsmen produced 25 of them, all from solid monoliths. And there is still one more thing. The corridors where these boxes stand are barely wide enough for 2 people to pass each other. There is no room for levers, no space for a crew. How 100-ton boxes were maneuvered through these tunnels and turned at right angles? Official archaeology has no answer. One box was never finished. It still sits in the middle of a corridor, exactly where the builders abandoned it. They left and never returned. On the outside of the boxes, rough, unremarkable hieroglyphs. On the inside, a mirror finish with tolerances that defy hand tools, as though 2 completely different groups of people were responsible, from 2 completely different points in history. Why that level of precision was needed for an animal burial has never been explained. If that feels unsettling, the next object is not buried in sand. It is buried directly beneath the ground you walk on. 1963. A farmer in central Turkey is repairing a wall in his basement. He knocks through it, and there is a tunnel on the other side. The tunnel goes down, then further down, then further still. That is how Derinkuyu was discovered. An underground city, 85 meters deep, 18 floors carved into the earth, built to hold up to 50,000 people. Inside, sleeping quarters, kitchens, storage rooms, wine cellars, stables, churches, and schools. More than 50 ventilation shafts cutting straight down through the full depth of the rock. And here is something that should not be possible. The ventilation still works. Fresh air still circulates through 85 meters of solid stone. This was not an accident. Someone designed it that way. Every level could be sealed off with massive stone doors, circular discs weighing up to half a ton each. They could only be locked from the inside. There was no way to open them from above. A city built so that those inside could disappear completely and stay gone. The obvious question: what were they hiding from? The official explanation is raids, but historians have not been able to identify a single enemy from that period that would justify sheltering 50,000 people 9 floors underground. And here is the detail most accounts leave out. Derinkuyu is not the only one. More than 200 similar complexes have been found across the Cappadocia region. Several of them are connected by tunnels stretching for kilometers. Who planned this network is unknown. No name, no record. Just stone descending 85 meters into the ground. But if people were hiding entire cities underground, something was happening on the surface. The next object gives us a clue about what that might have been, and it is not a comfortable one. 1790. Workers digging a drainage channel in the central square of Mexico City hit something. A few meters down, buried in the earth, they find a circular basalt disc, 3.5 meters across, 24 tons. It had been buried deliberately after the Spanish conquest. The conquistadors destroyed every Aztec artifact they could find. This one stayed hidden underground for 200 years. It is known as the Sunstone, but calling it a calendar does not quite cover it. At the center, the face of the sun god. Surrounding it, concentric rings of symbols encoding 20 day signs, a 52-year solar cycle, and 8 sections mapped to the night sky. Now here is where the questions start. Astronomers who analyzed the imagery confirmed that the star positions shown on the stone correspond precisely to the actual sky above Mexico. Not roughly, exactly. That kind of precision requires astronomical knowledge the 15th century Aztecs were not supposed to have. No telescopes, no star charts, no instruments we know of. And then there is the stone itself. It is carved from basalt. The detail work is so intricate that some symbols are only visible under magnification. According to the standard historical account, this was accomplished using stone and copper tools. No modern sculptor has managed to replicate anything close to this level of detail using those tools. No one. The stone sits in a museum in Mexico City. It has no official explanation that holds up under scrutiny. If that seems like enough of a mystery, the next object sits high in the Andes at an altitude of 3,700 meters, and the questions get bigger. 3,700 meters above sea level, overlooking the city of Cusco in Peru, there is a fortress, built by the Inca, 15th century, entirely by hand. The walls are made of limestone blocks. The largest single block weighs 125 tons. That is roughly the weight of 25 adult elephants, compressed into one solid piece of stone. But the weight is not the main issue. The blocks are fitted together without mortar. You cannot slide a sheet of paper into the gap. There is no gap. And every block is a different shape, irregular polygons, some with more than 12 individual faces, and each face lines up perfectly with its neighbor. This is not stonework. This is a three-dimensional interlocking puzzle built from stones that weigh over 100 tons each, with tolerances that modern engineers call borderline impossible. Structural engineers who have studied the site say the same thing. Reproducing this kind of joinery today, using cranes and laser-guided equipment, would push the limits of what is technically achievable. Now, here is the logistical problem. The nearest quarry is 35 kilometers away. Between the quarry and the site, there are rivers, steep mountain ridges, and elevation changes of several hundred meters. The official explanation for how the blocks were moved is ropes and wooden rollers. Controlled experiments have shown that this method works for stones weighing a few tons on flat ground, not for 125-ton blocks through mountain terrain. Local oral traditions offer a different answer. The builders used sound to move stone. That sounds impossible. But the acoustic manipulation of physical matter is a legitimate area of scientific research, and no one has conclusively ruled it out. The official explanation is missing about 120 tons of physics. From here we move to Greece, where something was pulled up from the sea floor that should not have been possible for another 1,000 years. 1901. A team of Greek divers is driven off course by a storm near the island of Antikythera. The captain sends one diver down to check the sea floor. The man comes back up in a panic, saying there are bodies down there, 60 meters below the surface. They turn out to be marble statues, remnants of an ancient Roman shipwreck, and somewhere among the wreckage, a corroded, unremarkable lump of bronze. For 2 years it sits in a storage crate at a museum in Athens. Then someone notices a crack in the surface. Inside, there is a glint of metal, a gear, small, precisely cut, inside an object 2,000 years old. X-ray scans would eventually reveal 37 interlocking bronze gears. The largest has 223 teeth. The entire device, no bigger than a hardcover book, calculated the positions of the sun, the moon, and 5 planets. It predicted solar eclipses. It tracked the schedule of the Olympic Games. But the detail that truly defies explanation is this. The device accounted for the fact that the moon does not travel at a constant speed. It speeds up and slows down as it orbits. To replicate that motion mechanically, the mechanism used 2 gears mounted on an offset axis, which is, in essence, a differential gear. The same component used in every modern automobile to let the wheels turn at different speeds when going around a corner. European engineers would not independently develop that same concept for another 1,500 years. The gear teeth are machined to a tolerance no hand tool could achieve. On the rear panel, a detailed user manual inscribed in Greek. The philosopher Cicero described a similar device attributed to Archimedes. That means this mechanism was not a one-off. It was part of a tradition, a whole body of knowledge. One example survived, one out of what must have been many. What happened to the rest, and what else belonged to that tradition, remains completely unknown. The last object on this list has not given up its secrets yet, because most of it is still sitting on the ocean floor, unexamined. 1986. A diving instructor is scouting the waters around Yonaguni Island in the far south of Japan. At about 5 meters depth, he sees something that does not belong. Terraces. Flat platforms of solid bedrock, clean right angles, parallel walls. Steps exactly 2 meters high, dropping down to a depth of 27 meters. The total footprint of the structure is around 45,000 square meters. For context, that is larger than the Colosseum in Rome. The central question, which researchers are still debating, is this: did nature do this, or did people? Some geologists argue that certain types of limestone fracture along clean lines. Straight edges and right angles can occur naturally. It is geologically possible. But then consider the following. On the main platform, there are 2 parallel channels, identical in depth, running in straight lines for several meters. Nearby, a staircase with evenly spaced steps. Cut into one of the walls, a rectangular opening. Professor Masaki Kimura spent 15 years studying this site. His conclusion? It is man-made. His estimate of its age? Around 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, this part of the ocean was dry land. The sea rose as the last glaciers melted. If Kimura is right, what lies on that sea floor are the ruins of a civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age, before agriculture, before written language, before everything our history books begin with. Official science has not accepted this interpretation, but it has not been able to disprove it either. Less than 10% of the complex has been studied. No one knows what the rest of it looks like. 7 objects, 7 countries, 7 different points in history. And one thing every single one has in common. Official history either has no explanation for it, or offers one that collapses the moment someone runs the numbers. 400,000 tons of stone, gone with no trace. 100-ton blocks carried through mountain ranges. A precision bronze computer submerged in the sea 2,000 years before we invented the concept. A city for 50,000 people, 18 floors underground, with no record of who built it or why. We are taught that history moves in a straight line. Each generation builds on the last, each civilization more advanced than the one before. But these objects suggest something different. They suggest that someone who came before us was capable of things we are not, and that at some point, that knowledge vanished. Not slowly, suddenly, as though it were deliberately removed. Which of these hit you hardest? Leave it in the comments. One word, or just the name of an object. And sit with this for a moment. If our civilization disappeared tomorrow, what would be left 10,000 years from now? What have we actually built that time could not erase? It is possible the people who carved Kailasa and raised the walls of Sacsayhuaman were asking themselves the very same thing.